Monday, September the 17th, 1787, witnessed the completion in Philadelphia of one of the most influential documents in modern history. The text in question was the work of 55 delegates who had devoted over 4 months to debating and arguing over its contents. By no means all of these men expressed enthusiasm about the final polished product. Some indeed actively rejected it. Nonetheless, here the finished document now was, 4,400 words, written in fine clerical hand on just 4 large sheets of parchment, the brand new Constitution of the United States of America. Now, there had been earlier attempts in different parts of the world to write down and summarize systems of government. But in at least 4 respects, the US Federal Constitution of 1787 represented something that was distinctive and innovatory. First, it was the product of and came increasingly to be seen as standing proxy for a Republican experiment that aspired, at least in part, to certain important democratic ideals. Second, this US Constitution was the first in history for which a measure of mass ratification was sought, so that not only most of its authors, but also large numbers of ordinary citizens gave their formal consent to its contents. Third, this US Constitution sought to do much more than to outline how a particular political system was to operate. As the Sydney academic Helen Irving has written, in 1787, the American framers took the historically original and remarkable step of using this Constitution to name and identify a people. We, the people of the United States, is how this most famous written Constitution begins. The clear implication, as George Washington remarked in his farewell address in 1796 when he leaves the presidency, was that a people had the right to determine what their constitutions of government were to be. A political constitution was no longer something that people merely lived under and tolerated. Rather, a constitution was now being presented as ideally an outcrop of a particular people and of what they aspired to, as a written expression of them. There was a further important respect in which this 1787 US Constitution proved groundbreaking. Because it was drafted at a period in history when the numbers of newspapers and print networks were expanding internationally and exponentially, and when transport mechanisms on land and sea were also widening fast, this document quickly and increasingly came to achieve a transcontinental audience. Made up of words and easily translated into any language and summarized, the US Constitution lent itself to ceaseless reproduction wherever print was in existence and was able to penetrate. And the repercussions of this international exposure were rapid and dramatic. Almost immediately, the American Constitution proved a major influence on French revolutionaries and on the 4 new constitutions that were drafted in France during the 1790s. These French revolutionary constitutions, together with the US Constitution, in turn influenced successive revolutionary constitutions in Haiti, where black activists quickly began demanding in the 1790s some of the same kinds of rights and freedoms that white revolutionaries were struggling for in Europe and the Americas. And this was just the beginning. In 1786, no country had possessed a single legal document that it formally styled a constitution. Yet by 1820, continental Europe alone had generated at least 48 written constitutions, most of which, like the Constitution of Westphalia of 1807, the first ever German constitution, were byproducts in some ways of the Napoleonic Wars, because the Napoleonic Wars really spreads written constitutions across continental Europe. Between 1820 and 1850, over 80 more constitutions were drafted, many of them in Latin America, where some newly independent republics, such as Chile, went through multiple constitutions. During the second half of the 19th century, written constitutions spread to some non-Western polities, such as Egypt and Japan. And by the end of the 20th century, as you know, written constitutions had become almost universal. Written constitutions, then, of the sort pioneered in Philadelphia in 1787, have become an integral, though often contested, component of our modern global landscape.